I'm sitting in my living room, laptop open, watching the most important business meeting of my company's history through a security camera feed. The buyer's counsel is reading Schedule B aloud to our CEO, whose hands are visibly trembling. Continuity requires the named integration officer present during transition, Patricia Walsh announces. She slides the contract across the mahogany table to Bradley Thompson, our CEO. Where is she? The $50 million acquisition deal hangs in the balance, and I'm the missing piece. 3 days ago, this same CEO fired me for planning my wedding on company time. Now he desperately needs me to save his company, but I'm not there. 2 weeks earlier, I was living in what felt like a carefully orchestrated chaos. My name is Frida Johnson, and at 28 years old, I had built what I thought was a secure career as integration officer at DataSync Solutions, a mid-sized tech startup in downtown Seattle. The rain was pattering against my office window on the 32nd floor as I reviewed merger documentation while simultaneously texting my wedding planner about centerpiece options. I had been with DataSync for 3 years, working my way up from junior analyst to my current position after successfully managing 2 smaller company acquisitions. Growing up on a cattle ranch in rural Montana, I was the first person in my family to attend college. My parents, Frank and Dorothy Johnson, had worked double shifts at the local grain elevator to help pay for my business degree at Washington State University. Every promotion felt like validation that their sacrifices had meaning. The DataSync offices buzzed with nervous energy. Our company specialized in data analytics software for healthcare providers, but we had been struggling financially for the past 18 months. Competition from larger firms was eating into our market share, and our burn rate was exceeding revenue by 30% each quarter. CEO Bradley Thompson had been increasingly volatile, cycling between manic optimism and dark pessimism about our future prospects. Bradley was a self-made entrepreneur who had founded DataSync 8 years earlier after selling his previous company to Microsoft for $45 million. He was brilliant, but controlling with a tendency to micromanage every aspect of operations. His corner office was decorated with motivational quotes and photographs from various business conferences where he had delivered keynote speeches about innovation and leadership. The Phoenix Capital Group acquisition represented our lifeline. They were offering $50 million for complete ownership of DataSync, which would allow Bradley to pay off company debts, provide employee retention bonuses, and walk away with a substantial personal profit. More importantly for employees like me, Phoenix Capital had committed to maintaining current staff levels for at least 2 years post-acquisition. My personal life was equally demanding. Daniel Rodriguez, my fiancé of 8 months, was a pediatric nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital. We had met during a community health fair where DataSync was providing free technology consultations for local nonprofits. Daniel was volunteering at a childhood vaccination booth, and his gentle manner with frightened children had immediately captured my attention. His warm brown eyes and infectious laugh made even the most stressful days manageable. Planning our wedding while managing the acquisition integration was proving more challenging than I had anticipated. Daniel's mother, Carmen Rodriguez, was a traditional woman who believed every detail of the ceremony should reflect family heritage and Catholic values. She called me at least twice daily with questions about guest seating arrangements, menu selections, and ceremony logistics. Carmen meant well, but her enthusiasm was overwhelming when combined with my professional responsibilities. The wedding venue we had selected, the historic Fairmont Hotel, required final decisions on numerous details within specific timeframes to maintain our September booking. Our deposit of $8,000 represented most of our combined savings accumulated through careful budgeting and weekend catering jobs Daniel worked to supplement his hospital income. During a particularly intense integration planning meeting, my phone buzzed with an urgent call from Jennifer Walsh, our venue coordinator. The irony of sharing a last name with Phoenix Capital's legal counsel would only become apparent later. I glanced at Bradley, who was deep in discussion with our legal team about transition timelines, and quietly stepped into the hallway. "Ms. Johnson, I'm terribly sorry to bother you at work." Jennifer's voice carried a note of panic. "We've discovered a scheduling conflict with your September date. Another couple booked the same weekend through our sister property, and there was a communication error in our system. We need you to choose between 3 alternative dates immediately, or we'll have to refund your deposit and release the booking." My stomach dropped. The alternative dates were either in the middle of the acquisition transition period or conflicted with Daniel's work schedule at the hospital. I spent 20 minutes negotiating options, ultimately securing a date 2 weeks later than originally planned. When I returned to the conference room, the meeting had concluded, and Bradley was standing at the window with his arms crossed. "Frida, I need to speak with you privately." His tone was ice cold, and the other attendees quickly gathered their materials and filed out. Bradley closed the door and turned to face me with an expression I had never seen before. "I've been watching everyone on this team very carefully over the past few weeks. This acquisition represents the culmination of everything I've built here, and I need to know that every person involved is 100% committed to our success." He paused, studying my face. "Anyone whose attention is divided, anyone who puts personal matters ahead of company interests during this critical period has no place on my team." The implication was clear, but I tried to remain professional. "Bradley, I understand the importance of this acquisition. My integration framework has been central to Phoenix Capital's interest in our company. I'm fully committed to ensuring the transition succeeds. Your commitment will be measured by your actions over the next several weeks, not by your words." Bradley returned to his desk without another word, effectively dismissing me from his office. That evening, I shared the conversation with Daniel as we prepared dinner in our small Capitol Hill apartment. He was chopping vegetables for our usual Tuesday pasta dish while I recounted the day's events. "He's just stressed about the deal," Daniel suggested, trying to provide reassurance. "Once everything goes through, things will calm down. You've worked too hard to let his bad mood affect your confidence." I wanted to believe that, but something in Bradley's demeanor suggested this was more than pre-deal anxiety. He had looked at me like I was already an outsider, someone whose loyalty was questionable. That night, I lay awake wondering if I had made a mistake by taking Jennifer's call during the meeting, but the venue situation had been genuinely urgent. The following week brought an escalation in both work demands and wedding pressure that pushed me to my emotional limits. Bradley announced on Friday afternoon that Phoenix Capital had requested comprehensive documentation of our integration procedures, and he needed me to create a detailed manual over the weekend. "They want to see exactly how we plan to merge their existing data infrastructure with our current systems," he explained during an impromptu meeting in his office. "This manual needs to be thorough enough that their technical team can evaluate our competency level. I need it completed by Monday morning." I had planned to spend Saturday at my final bridal dress fitting and Sunday touring potential reception venues with Daniel and Carmen. The fitting had already been rescheduled twice due to work obligations, and the seamstress had warned that further delays might not allow sufficient time for alterations. "I understand the urgency," I replied, calculating how I might manage both obligations. "I can work Saturday evening and Sunday morning to complete the documentation." "Frida, this isn't something you can squeeze in around personal appointments. Phoenix Capital is evaluating our entire operational structure based on these materials. I need your complete focus for the next 48 hours. The weight of his expectations settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I canceled the dress fitting and asked Daniel to handle the venue tours with his mother. Carmen was disappointed but understanding when Daniel explained the situation. She had worked as an administrative assistant for 30 years and recognized the demands of corporate deadlines. I spent that weekend in the empty data sync office surrounded by integration charts, system diagrams, and technical specifications. The documentation grew to 67 pages, covering every aspect of the proposed merger, from data migration protocols to employee training schedules. My attention to detail had always been my professional strength inherited from years of watching my father maintain precise records for cattle breeding and crop rotation on our family ranch. Bradley's surveillance of my activities became increasingly obvious during this period. New software appeared on my company laptop that tracked time spent on various applications and websites. I noticed him observing my phone conversations and monitoring my break times. The office atmosphere grew tense as other employees sensed his heightened scrutiny. Sarah Martinez, my closest colleague and friend at DataSync, mentioned during lunch that Bradley had asked her about my recent performance and attitude. Sarah worked in business development and had helped me navigate company politics during my first year. She was a single mother raising 2 young daughters while building her career, and she understood the challenge of balancing professional and personal responsibilities. "He seems paranoid about something," Sarah whispered as we ate sandwiches in the break room. "Yesterday he asked me if you had mentioned any concerns about the acquisition or whether you seemed distracted lately. I told him you were the most dedicated person on the team, but he didn't seem satisfied with that answer." Phoenix Capital's preliminary review of my integration documentation exceeded expectations. Patricia Walsh, their lead counsel, called Bradley directly to compliment the thoroughness and professionalism of the materials. She specifically mentioned that Frida Johnson's work demonstrated the kind of operational excellence Phoenix Capital valued in acquisition targets. The positive feedback should have improved my standing with Bradley, but instead it seemed to increase his suspicion. During our next team meeting, he made pointed comments about the importance of undivided loyalty and the dangers of divided attention during critical business periods. My wedding planning reached a crisis point when the florist called with urgent questions about arrangements that needed approval by close of business. Daniel was working a double shift at the hospital, and I was the only person authorized to make decisions about our floral budget. The florist explained that delayed approval would mean substituting our chosen flowers with alternatives that didn't match our color scheme. I handled the calls during what I believed were private moments, stepping into empty conference rooms or taking brief breaks in the parking garage. Each conversation lasted only a few minutes, and I was careful to complete all assigned work tasks on schedule. My performance metrics remained strong, and I had never missed a deadline or failed to meet quality standards. The trap was being set with precision I wouldn't understand until much later. Bradley was building a case against me, documenting every personal phone call and every moment spent addressing wedding-related matters. He was preparing to remove me from the acquisition team, apparently unaware that doing so would jeopardize the entire deal. On Thursday afternoon, Bradley called an emergency meeting with Janet Foster, our HR director, and Marcus Thompson, our legal counsel. Janet was a competent professional who had joined DataSync 2 years earlier after working in human resources for several larger companies. Marcus handled our corporate legal matters and had been instrumental in structuring the Phoenix Capital acquisition agreement. I was summoned to the conference room at 4:30 in the afternoon, expecting to discuss final preparations for the deal closing scheduled for the following week. Instead, I found myself facing what felt like a tribunal. Bradley sat at the head of the table with a manila folder containing printed documents. Janet and Marcus flanked him, both wearing expressions of professional discomfort. "Frida, we need to discuss some concerns about your recent performance and professional conduct." Bradley began opening the folder to reveal printed screenshots of my computer activity phone logs, showing the time and duration of personal calls and security camera photographs, showing me taking calls in various locations around the office. The evidence was comprehensive and damaging. Timestamps showed personal calls during work hours, website visits to wedding vendors during company time, and text message activity on my personal phone while sitting at my desk. Bradley had been conducting surveillance for weeks, building an airtight case for termination. These records demonstrate a clear pattern of using company time and resources for personal activities, Bradley continued. During one of the most critical periods in DataSync's history, you've consistently prioritized wedding planning over professional responsibilities. I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized the scope of his documentation. Every brief call to vendors, every quick text message to Daniel, every moment spent addressing urgent wedding matters had been recorded and cataloged. The evidence painted a picture of someone more concerned with personal matters than professional obligations. Janet and Marcus exchanged uncomfortable glances. They recognized that Bradley's case was legally sound, even if his methods felt excessive. With the acquisition pending, any hint of employee misconduct needed to be addressed decisively to avoid potential complications with Phoenix Capital. I understand these activities occurred, but they were limited to urgent matters that couldn't be delayed, I said, attempting to defend myself. My work performance has never suffered, and I've met every deadline and quality standard expected of my position. Performance standards include full attention and dedication to company objectives, Bradley replied. Using company time for personal matters violates your employment agreement regardless of your overall productivity. We cannot have employees who prioritize personal interests during critical business periods. The meeting concluded with Bradley announcing my immediate termination for breach of professional conduct. I was required to surrender my security badge company laptop and office phone before leaving the premises. The entire process took less than 30 minutes, transforming me from a key team member to a former employee with shocking efficiency. Walking out of the DataSync building with a cardboard box containing my personal belongings was the most humiliating experience of my professional life. The elevator ride to the ground floor felt endless as I processed what had just occurred. 3 years of dedicated work, successful project completions, and professional growth had been erased in a single afternoon meeting. Other employees witnessed my departure, their faces reflecting confusion and concern. Sarah Martinez stood near the reception area, her eyes wide with disbelief as she watched me carry my possessions through the lobby. The security guard Tom Williams, who had greeted me cheerfully every morning for 3 years, avoided eye contact as I handed over my building access card. I drove home through Seattle's afternoon traffic in a state of emotional shock. The familiar route through Capitol Hill seemed surreal as I grappled with the sudden destruction of my career stability. Rain streaked the windshield of my Honda Civic, matching the tears I fought to control until reaching the safety of my apartment. Daniel found me sitting on our living room couch, still wearing my business attire, staring at the cardboard box of personal items. His nursing shift had ended early, and he had stopped at the grocery store to buy ingredients for a celebration dinner, expecting to hear positive news about the acquisition progress. "Frida, what happened? Why are you home so early?" he asked, setting down grocery bags and sitting beside me on our second-hand sofa. The concern in his voice broke through my emotional numbness, and I began crying for the first time since leaving the office. Through tears, I explained the entire situation. Bradley's surveillance, the documented evidence of personal calls, the termination meeting with HR and legal counsel. Daniel listened with growing anger, his usual calm demeanor replaced by protective fury on my behalf. "This is insane," he said after I finished recounting the events. "Every person in America handles personal matters during work hours occasionally. You never missed deadlines or failed to complete assignments. He's been looking for an excuse to get rid of you. The rational part of my mind understood Daniel's perspective, but shame and self-doubt overwhelmed my logical thinking. Had I been unprofessional? Had I prioritized my wedding over responsibilities? Bradley's accusations echoed in my thoughts, making me question decisions that had seemed reasonable at the time. Our financial situation became immediately precarious. My salary of $68,000 annually had been our primary income, with Daniel's nursing position providing $38,000 plus benefits. We had been living paycheck to paycheck while saving for the wedding and building an emergency fund that had been depleted by wedding expenses. The venue's final payment of $12,000 was due in 10 days. Our combined savings account contained only $4,000 after paying for the dress photography deposits and catering arrangements. Without my income, we faced the devastating choice between postponing our wedding or risking financial ruin. "Maybe we should postpone everything until you find another job," Daniel suggested, gently holding my hands as we sat together that evening. "The deposits we've already paid aren't worth destroying our financial security." The suggestion felt like salt in an open wound. Our wedding represented more than a celebration. It symbolized our commitment to building a life together despite challenges and obstacles. Postponing felt like allowing Bradley's actions to destroy our personal happiness in addition to my professional life. That night, unable to sleep, I began organizing my personal files and documents from the data sync job. Among the papers was my personal copy of the Phoenix Capital Acquisition Agreement, which I had kept for reference while developing the integration framework. As I flipped through the pages, reviewing technical specifications and transition timelines, my eyes caught something in Schedule B that made my heart race. The language in Schedule B was precise and unambiguous. Continuity of operations requires the named integration officer, Frida Johnson, to be present and available during the complete transition period. The named individual must personally oversee data migration, staff training, and system integration to ensure operational stability meets Phoenix Capital standards. The implications hit me like lightning. This language had been my own suggestion during contract negotiations, intended to protect my job security by making my role essential to the deal's success. Phoenix Capital had insisted on this specific clause because they were impressed with my integration methodology and wanted assurance that I would personally manage the transition. Bradley had signed this agreement without apparently understanding that firing me would violate a key contractual requirement. The acquisition could not legally proceed without my participation, regardless of his personal feelings about my performance or conduct. For the first time since leaving the office, I felt a surge of hope mixed with strategic thinking. The same attention to detail that had gotten me fired might also provide the leverage needed to secure justice and protect my financial future. Friday morning brought clarity that had been missing since my termination. I spread the Phoenix Capital acquisition documents across our kitchen table while Daniel prepared coffee before his hospital shift. The contract language was unambiguous, and my legal position was stronger than I had initially realized. Schedule B didn't just mention my involvement in general terms, it specifically named me as the required integration officer and detailed my responsibilities during the transition period. Phoenix Capital had structured their offer based on confidence in my ability to manage the complex merger of their existing data systems with DataSync's platform. I researched contract law using online legal databases, confirming my understanding of the implications. The acquisition agreement created binding obligations for both parties, and DataSync's failure to provide the named integration officer would constitute a material breach, allowing Phoenix Capital to withdraw their offer without penalty. My next step was consulting with employment attorney Lisa Henderson, whose office was located in downtown Seattle's financial district. Lisa had been recommended by Daniel's sister Maria, who worked as a paralegal for a personal injury firm. I called Lisa's office immediately after her Friday morning availability opened. Ms. Johnson, your situation is more complex than a typical wrongful termination case, Lisa explained during our phone consultation. The timing of your dismissal combined with your essential role in a major business transaction creates multiple legal issues. I'd like to meet in person to review all documentation. Our meeting was scheduled for Monday morning, giving me the weekend to gather evidence and develop a comprehensive understanding of my position. Lisa's preliminary assessment was encouraging. She believed Bradley's termination decision was legally questionable given my performance record and the proximity to the acquisition closing. Daniel supported my decision to fight the termination despite his natural inclination toward avoiding conflict. You've worked too hard to let someone destroy your career because of their personal issues, he said as we discussed strategy over dinner Friday evening. If you don't stand up for yourself, who will? His perspective helped me realize that this situation extended beyond personal grievances. If Bradley could terminate a key employee without consequence during a critical business period, other data sync workers faced similar vulnerability. Standing up for myself might protect colleagues from future arbitrary treatment. Saturday afternoon brought an unexpected call from Sarah Martinez. She had obtained my personal phone number from our HR files and was calling to share information she thought I needed to know. Frida, something strange is happening here, Sarah whispered, apparently calling from her car in the data sync parking lot. Bradley has been frantically trying to convince Phoenix Capital that other people can handle your integration responsibilities. He's been on conference calls all morning, and I heard him shouting at someone about contract modifications. Sarah's intelligence confirmed my strategic assessment. Bradley was discovering that removing me from the deal created problems he hadn't anticipated. His attempts to minimize the situation with Phoenix Capital were apparently failing based on his increasingly desperate behavior. Phoenix Capital sent representatives to the office yesterday, Sarah continued. They wanted to meet with you about final transition preparations, and Bradley had to explain that you were no longer with the company. The Phoenix people seemed shocked and asked a lot of questions about why you left so suddenly. This information revealed the timeline pressure working in my favor. Phoenix Capital had structured their deal closing for the following Friday, only 6 business days away. Any delay in the acquisition would jeopardize their financing arrangements and potentially void their purchase offer entirely. Sunday evening, Daniel and I made the difficult decision to proceed with our wedding plans regardless of immediate financial constraints. We would accept help from both our families if necessary, refusing to allow Bradley's actions to destroy our personal happiness. Carmen Rodriguez offered to cover the venue's final payment as an early wedding gift, and my parents committed to paying for photography services. This is about more than money, Daniel said as we finalized our decision. This is about not letting someone else's bad behavior control our future. We're getting married because we love each other, not because we can afford a perfect celebration. His words crystallized my resolve to pursue justice through legal channels. Bradley had created this crisis through poor judgment and vindictive behavior. I had the legal right and moral obligation to protect myself and ensure the consequences of his decisions fell on him rather than innocent employees or my personal life. Monday morning's meeting with Lisa Henderson confirmed the strength of my position. After reviewing the acquisition documents, my employment file, and the termination evidence, she was confident that we could achieve a favorable resolution. Data Sync is facing what we call a self-inflicted crisis, Lisa explained. They created a situation where they need your cooperation to avoid financial catastrophe, but they terminated you without cause. This gives us significant leverage to negotiate a fair settlement. Lisa's strategy focused on professional resolution rather than prolonged litigation. We would present clear demands for reinstatement compensation for wrongful termination and assurance of no retaliation. The goal was protecting my interests while allowing the acquisition to proceed successfully. The key is timing, Lisa emphasized. Phoenix Capital needs certainty about your participation by Thursday evening to meet their Friday closing deadline. We'll use that timeline to encourage prompt resolution of your employment status. That evening brought the unexpected phone call that would change everything. Patricia Walsh from Phoenix Capital called my personal number, having obtained it through DataSync's HR department. Her tone carried concern and confusion about my sudden absence from the deal team. Ms. Johnson, I hope I'm not overstepping by calling directly, but we have some urgent questions about the integration timeline. Bradley Thompson informed us that you've been promoted to a different division, but we haven't received updated contact information or transition documentation. Patricia's words revealed that Bradley had lied to Phoenix Capital about the circumstances of my departure. Instead of acknowledging the termination, he had fabricated a story about internal reorganization to avoid admitting his mistake. Ms. Walsh, I appreciate your call, but I should clarify that I'm currently between positions due to recent company restructuring. I replied, carefully avoiding direct contradiction of Bradley's version while introducing the truth. Patricia's silence on the phone suggested she was processing the implications of this information. Phoenix Capital had invested months of due diligence specifically because of the integration framework I had developed. Without my involvement, their acquisition strategy faced serious complications. Ms. Johnson, would it be possible for us to meet tomorrow to discuss how we can ensure the transition proceeds smoothly? Phoenix Capital has structured this entire deal around the methodology you created, and we need to understand how recent changes affect our timeline. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday morning at Patricia's downtown Seattle office. For the first time since my termination, I felt the power dynamic shifting in my favor. Phoenix Capital needed me more than Bradley had realized, and his deception about my status was creating additional problems for his credibility. Tuesday morning's meeting with Patricia Walsh took place in Phoenix Capital's temporary Seattle office on the 42nd floor of the Columbia Center. The panoramic view of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains provided a stunning backdrop for what would become the most important professional conversation of my career. Patricia was an experienced corporate attorney in her early 50s, with silver-streaked hair and the confident demeanor of someone who had negotiated hundreds of complex business deals. Her reputation in Seattle's financial community was impeccable, and her involvement in the DataSync acquisition represented Phoenix Capital's commitment to thorough due diligence. Ms. Johnson, I want to be direct about Phoenix Capital's concerns regarding recent developments at DataSync. Patricia began as we sat in her conference room. Your integration methodology was central to our decision to pursue this acquisition. The framework you developed demonstrates the kind of operational excellence that attracted our investment interest. I maintained a professional demeanor while allowing Patricia to understand the reality of my situation. I appreciate your confidence in my work. However, I should clarify that my current employment status with DataSync is somewhat uncertain due to recent organizational changes. Patricia's expression shifted as she processed the implications of my careful language. Her experience in corporate acquisitions had taught her to recognize diplomatic phrasing that concealed significant problems. When you say uncertain employment status, what exactly does that mean? Bradley Thompson indicated you had been promoted to a different division, but our attempts to reach you through DataSync channels have been unsuccessful. The moment had arrived for complete honesty. Ms. Walsh, I was terminated from DataSync last Thursday for alleged personal use of company time. Mr. Thompson's description of my status appears to be inaccurate. Patricia's face went pale as she absorbed this information. Phoenix Capital had structured their entire acquisition strategy around confidence in my ability to manage the technical integration. Learning that I had been fired created immediate concerns about the viability of their investment. This is extremely troubling, Patricia said, reaching for her phone. We need to understand exactly what happened and how it affects our deal timeline. Phoenix Capital's board approved this acquisition based on specific assurances about operational continuity. She placed a conference call to Bradley's office requesting an immediate explanation for the discrepancy between his previous statements and my current information. I could hear Bradley's voice through the speakerphone, initially confident, but becoming increasingly defensive as Patricia pressed for details. Patricia, there was a minor personnel adjustment that doesn't affect our ability to complete the integration, Bradley claimed. We have other qualified staff members who can handle these responsibilities. Mr. Thompson, our due diligence was specifically focused on Ms. Johnson's methodology and expertise. The integration framework that impressed our technical team was her personal creation. Are you saying other employees have equivalent knowledge and experience? Bradley's pause revealed his growing awareness of the problem he had created. Well, Frida was certainly valuable, but our team is capable of adapting to personnel changes. We can modify the integration approach if necessary. Patricia's voice became noticeably colder. Mr. Thompson, Phoenix Capital's investment decision was based on confidence in a specific operational plan. Fundamental changes to that plan would require new board approval and could delay our closing beyond our financing deadline. After ending the call, Patricia turned to me with an expression mixing frustration and strategic thinking. Her years of experience had taught her that successful acquisitions required stability and transparency from all parties involved. Ms. Johnson, I need to understand your perspective on this situation. Are you willing to participate in the integration process if your employment issues can be resolved? Phoenix Capital values continuity and would prefer to proceed with the original team structure. I explained my position carefully, emphasizing my commitment to professional excellence while acknowledging the challenges created by my termination. Patricia listened with the attention of someone evaluating multiple potential solutions to a complex problem. What would it take to secure your participation in this integration? Patricia asked directly. Phoenix Capital has significant flexibility in ensuring that key personnel are available for critical business transitions. Before I could respond, Patricia's phone buzzed with urgent messages. Bradley was apparently calling repeatedly, but she declined to answer while we completed our discussion. I would be delighted to ensure this integration succeeds, I replied. However, my current legal situation requires resolution before I can make any commitments. I'm working with employment counsel to address the circumstances of my termination. Patricia nodded with understanding. Corporate acquisitions frequently involved employment disputes that needed resolution before deals could close. Her experience had taught her that addressing personnel issues promptly was usually more cost-effective than allowing them to fester. Phoenix Capital has encountered similar situations in previous acquisitions. We're prepared to work with all parties to ensure that qualified personnel are available for critical operations. What timeline does your counsel suggest for resolving these matters? I explained that Lisa Henderson was prepared to negotiate a prompt resolution if DataSync demonstrated good faith interest in addressing the situation professionally. Patricia took notes as I described the basic framework for potential settlement discussions. Our meeting was interrupted by Bradley's arrival at Phoenix Capital's offices. Patricia's assistant announced that he was demanding an immediate meeting to discuss urgent acquisition matters. Patricia agreed to see him, but insisted that I remain present since the discussion involved my professional status. Bradley entered the conference room with visible agitation, clearly not expecting to find me present for the discussion. His usual confidence was replaced by defensive posturing as he realized that his deception about my status had been exposed. Patricia, I think there's been some misunderstanding about our personnel situation. Bradley began avoiding eye contact with me. Frida's departure was a routine business decision that doesn't affect our operational capabilities. Mr. Thompson, Ms. Johnson has provided a very different account of recent events. She indicates that her employment was terminated, contradicting your previous statements about promotion and reorganization. Which version is accurate? Bradley's face flushed as he struggled to maintain his fabricated story while facing direct contradiction. The pressure of potentially losing the acquisition was clearly affecting his decision-making abilities. There were some performance issues that required personnel adjustments, Bradley admitted reluctantly. However, we can certainly work around any staffing challenges to meet Phoenix Capital's requirements. Patricia's patience was clearly wearing thin. Mr. Thompson, Phoenix Capital's investment is based on confidence in specific operational processes and personnel. Significant changes to key staff require immediate disclosure and consultation. The failure to provide accurate information about Ms. Johnson's status is deeply concerning. The meeting concluded with Patricia issuing an ultimatum that would define the next phase of the crisis. Phoenix Capital would only proceed with the acquisition if they received assurance that the original integration team would be available for the transition period. We need confirmation by Thursday evening that Ms. Johnson will participate in the integration process or will need to reconsider our investment timeline. Any perception that key personnel are unavailable or unwilling to cooperate will require board review of our acquisition decision. As Bradley left the Phoenix Capital offices, his previous arrogance had been replaced by obvious desperation. The $50 million deal he had thought was secured was now hanging in the balance because of his impulsive decision to terminate me. Patricia walked me to the elevator with a final observation that crystallized the power dynamic. Ms. Johnson, Phoenix Capital values professional competence and integrity above all else. We hope that DataSync will resolve this situation in a manner that allows us to proceed with confidence in our partnership. Tuesday evening brought frantic phone calls from Bradley as news of the Phoenix Capital meeting spread through DataSync's leadership team. My personal phone rang repeatedly with calls from his office, which I declined while referring all communication through Lisa Henderson's law firm. Bradley's desperation became apparent through the voicemail messages he left, alternating between threats of legal action and offers of reinstatement. His tone ranged from angry accusations of sabotage to pleading requests for cooperation, revealing his recognition that the acquisition was in jeopardy. "Frida, you're destroying this company and putting everyone's jobs at risk," he said in one message. "Whatever personal issues you have with management decisions, you can't hold the entire organization hostage over a simple personnel matter." Lisa Henderson fielded subsequent calls from Bradley's attorney, Marcus Thompson, who was tasked with negotiating some form of resolution. Marcus understood the legal vulnerabilities in Bradley's position and recommended settlement discussions to avoid prolonged litigation that could derail the acquisition permanently. Wednesday morning brought an emergency board meeting at DataSync convened by the company's 3 outside investors who had learned about the crisis from Phoenix Capital. The board members included venture capital representatives who had provided DataSync's initial funding and growth capital during the previous 4 years. Sarah Martinez called to provide intelligence about the meeting's atmosphere and outcomes. She had overheard portions of the discussion while working late in the adjacent conference room. "It was brutal," Sarah whispered during her lunch break call. The board members were furious with Bradley for creating this situation. One of them kept asking how he could fire a key employee 3 days before the most important deal in company history. The board's anger was understandable from a business perspective. DataSync's financial condition required the Phoenix Capital acquisition to avoid bankruptcy within months. Bradley's decision to terminate me had jeopardized the company's survival over what the board viewed as minor personnel management issues. "They're pressuring him to fix this immediately," Sarah continued. "Someone mentioned that Phoenix Capital is already evaluating alternative acquisition targets in case our deal falls through." Bradley looked like he was going to be sick. DataSync's employees were beginning to understand that their job security depended on resolving my employment status. Word of the crisis had spread through the office, creating anxiety about the company's future and anger toward Bradley for creating unnecessary instability. Several colleagues reached out to express support and concern about the situation. Their messages revealed that many employees had found Bradley's surveillance and controlling behavior increasingly problematic, but had been afraid to speak up due to economic uncertainty. "We all know he's been out of line lately," wrote Tom Chen, a senior developer who had been with DataSync since its founding. "Your work has been exemplary, and everyone knows this situation is unfair. We're hoping you'll come back so we can all keep our jobs." Wednesday afternoon brought Phoenix Capital's formal notification that they were placing the acquisition on hold pending resolution of key personnel availability issues. Patricia Walsh's letter to Bradley was professionally worded, but unmistakably clear about the consequences of continued delay. Phoenix Capital requires certainty about operational continuity before proceeding with our investment. The current uncertainty regarding integration leadership creates unacceptable risk for our organization. We need definitive resolution by Thursday at 5 p.m., or we'll need to pursue alternative investment opportunities. Bradley's response was to schedule an emergency meeting with Phoenix Capital for Thursday morning, apparently hoping to convince them that other employees could manage the integration responsibilities. This strategy demonstrated his continued failure to understand why Phoenix Capital had structured the deal around my specific involvement. Thursday morning's meeting was a disaster for Bradley's position, according to Patricia Walsh's subsequent call to my attorney. Bradley had attempted to present alternative integration plans using other DataSync employees, but Phoenix Capital's technical team immediately identified significant gaps in knowledge and methodology. "Mr. Thompson fundamentally misunderstands why we structured this acquisition around Ms. Johnson's involvement," Patricia explained to Lisa Henderson. "Her integration framework incorporates proprietary techniques that other employees cannot replicate. Attempting to proceed without her participation would compromise the entire operational transition." Patricia's call included an offer that demonstrated Phoenix Capital's commitment to securing my participation. They were prepared to structure part of my compensation directly through their organization if DataSync continued to resist fair resolution of my employment status. Phoenix Capital values professional competence and would consider offering Ms. Johnson a senior position in our corporate development team regardless of her status with DataSync. However, we would prefer to maintain the existing team structure if possible. This offer provided additional leverage for settlement negotiations while ensuring my financial security regardless of Bradley's cooperation. Phoenix Capital's confidence in my abilities validated my professional competence despite Bradley's attempts to undermine my reputation. Thursday afternoon brought Bradley's capitulation through a call from Marcus Thompson to Lisa Henderson. Bradley was finally prepared to negotiate a settlement that would allow the acquisition to proceed on schedule. "Mr. Thompson recognizes that this situation has become untenable for all parties," Marcus explained. "DataSync is prepared to discuss terms for Ms. Johnson's reinstatement and appropriate compensation for the disruption to her employment." The settlement discussions moved quickly once Bradley acknowledged the strength of my legal position. My demands were reasonable and focused on restoring my professional standing rather than seeking punitive damages that might jeopardize the acquisition. Lisa negotiated reinstatement with full back pay, public acknowledgement that my termination was based on misunderstanding rather than performance issues written, guarantee against retaliation and compensation for legal fees and emotional distress. The total settlement amount was modest compared to the acquisition value, but significant for my personal financial security. Thursday evening brought Bradley's reluctant agreement to all settlement terms. The formal paperwork would be completed Friday morning, allowing the Phoenix Capital acquisition to proceed on schedule that afternoon. "Ms. Johnson, I want you to understand that this resolution serves everyone's interests," Marcus Thompson explained during the final settlement call. "DataSync values your contributions and looks forward to your continued involvement in our success." The diplomatic language couldn't disguise the reality that Bradley had been forced to capitulate completely. His attempt to remove me had backfired spectacularly, nearly destroying the company while strengthening my professional position. Friday morning would bring the final confrontation and the satisfying resolution of a crisis that had tested my resilience and revealed the power of careful preparation combined with principled persistence. Friday morning dawned with crystal-clear Seattle skies that seemed to mirror my renewed sense of purpose and confidence. I dressed carefully in my best business suit, a charcoal gray ensemble that Daniel had helped me select for important client presentations. Today, I would return to DataSync not as a terminated employee seeking mercy, but as a professional whose value had been dramatically validated by external recognition. Patricia Walsh had scheduled the acquisition signing for 2 p.m., allowing time for final document preparation and settlement completion. Lisa Henderson met me at her office at 8 a.m. to review the signed settlement agreement and prepare for what she described as my professional resurrection. "Remember, you're returning from a position of strength," Lisa advised as we reviewed the terms one final time. "Bradley's behavior has been exposed as poor judgment that nearly destroyed his company. You have nothing to apologize for or feel ashamed about." The settlement terms exceeded my initial expectations. DataSync agreed to reinstate me with full back pay for the entire week, plus an additional week's salary as compensation for emotional distress. More importantly, Bradley was required to send a company-wide email acknowledging that my termination had been based on misunderstanding and that I was returning with full recognition of my professional contributions. My arrival at DataSync at 9 a.m. created a buzz of excitement among employees who had spent the week anxiously following developments in the acquisition crisis. Sarah Martinez met me at the elevator with a smile that conveyed both relief and admiration. "Everyone's been talking about how you basically saved the company," Sarah whispered as we walked toward my office. "Bradley's been locked in his office since yesterday afternoon, and HR has been preparing your reinstatement paperwork all morning." The company-wide email from Bradley was distributed at 9:15 a.m., exactly as specified in the settlement agreement. His words were carefully chosen to acknowledge error without admitting legal liability, but the message was clear to everyone reading it. DataSync is pleased to announce that Frida Johnson is returning to her position as Integration Officer effective immediately. Recent personnel changes were based on misunderstanding of company priorities and Ms. Johnson's exemplary dedication to our organization. We look forward to her continued leadership during our transition with Phoenix Capital. My office had been restored to exactly the condition it was before my termination, with all computer access and security clearances reactivated. The integration documentation I had prepared over that difficult weekend was still being used as the foundation for Phoenix Capital's technical evaluation. Bradley's private apology came shortly after my return, delivered in his office with obvious reluctance and discomfort. He sat behind his desk, unable to maintain eye contact while acknowledging that his actions had been misguided. "Ida, you to know that I recognize this situation got out of hand. The pressure of the acquisition made me question loyalties that I should never have doubted. Your work has always been exemplary, and I hope we can move forward professionally." I accepted his apology with the grace that my parents had taught me during childhood conflicts on the ranch. But I made clear that trust would need to be rebuilt through actions rather than words. "Bradley, I appreciate your acknowledgement of what happened. I'm committed to ensuring this acquisition succeeds because it's important for everyone who works here. However, I expect that future personnel decisions will be based on performance and professionalism rather than personal surveillance." The acquisition signing ceremony took place in DataSync's largest conference room, with representatives from Phoenix Capital DataSync leadership legal teams and key employees present. Patricia Walsh had specifically requested that I participate visibly in the proceedings to demonstrate operational continuity. Bradley's hands were visibly shaking as he signed the final documents, his earlier confidence replaced by the recognition of how close he had come to destroying everything he had built. The $50 million transaction that should have been his crowning achievement had become a humiliating lesson in the consequences of poor judgment. Patricia Walsh made a point of publicly acknowledging my role in creating the integration framework that had attracted Phoenix Capital's interest. Her comments served both to validate my professional competence and to subtly emphasize how Bradley's actions had nearly jeopardized the deal. Phoenix Capital is particularly impressed with the operational excellence demonstrated by DataSync's integration planning. Frida Johnson's methodology represents exactly the kind of systematic thinking that we value in our portfolio companies. The post-signing reception was surreal, watching Bradley attempt to celebrate a deal that he had nearly destroyed through his own vindictive behavior. Other employees treated me with a respect that acknowledged my role in preserving their job security during the crisis. Phoenix Capital's offer of a senior position in their corporate development team came during a private conversation with Patricia Walsh after the signing ceremony. The role would involve managing integration projects for their entire acquisition portfolio, with a salary increase of 35% and significantly better benefits. Ms. Johnson, Phoenix Capital recognizes exceptional talent when we see it. Your handling of this difficult situation demonstrated exactly the kind of professionalism and resilience we value in senior team members. I accepted the offer with gratitude, knowing that my future was now secure, regardless of any potential future conflicts at DataSync. The new position would begin after a 2-month transition period, allowing me to complete the current integration and train my replacement. The financial settlement combined with my new salary resolved all wedding-related expenses and provided a substantial emergency fund for Daniel and me. We decided to proceed with our original wedding plans, enhanced by the knowledge that our financial foundation was stronger than ever. Carmen Rodriguez was delighted to learn that the venue payment crisis had been resolved and that I would be starting a new job with significant advancement potential. "Mija, you showed them that a strong woman doesn't let anyone push her around," she said during a celebration dinner at her house that weekend. DataSync implemented new employment policies within a month of the acquisition closing, including protections against retaliatory termination and clear guidelines for personal time usage during work hours. Bradley chastened by nearly losing everything enrolled in executive coaching to address his management style and control issues. 6 months later, I was thriving in my role at Phoenix Capital, managing integration projects across their acquisition portfolio and serving as a mentor for young professionals facing workplace challenges. My experience at DataSync had taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself while maintaining professional integrity. Daniel and I celebrated our first wedding anniversary with deep appreciation for the strength we had discovered during the crisis. Our marriage had been tested before it even began, but we had emerged with confidence in our ability to face any challenge together. The most satisfying element of the entire experience was realizing that my meticulous attention to detail, the same quality that had led to my initial termination, had ultimately provided the leverage needed to secure justice and advance my career. The integration framework that I had developed during late nights and weekend work had become the foundation for professional recognition and opportunity. Bradley eventually learned to become a more thoughtful leader, though he never fully regained the respect he had lost during the crisis. The acquisition was successful, and DataSync's employees maintained their job security while benefiting from Phoenix Capital's resources and stability. Looking back, I understand that this experience taught me to value myself and fight for what's right, even when the immediate consequences seem overwhelming. Sometimes standing up for yourself requires risking everything you've worked to build, but self-respect and justice are worth the fight. The lesson that resonates most deeply is that careful preparation and principled persistence can overcome seemingly impossible odds. My father always said that attention to detail separates successful people from those who settle for mediocrity. In this case, that attention to detail quite literally saved my career and transformed a devastating setback into personal and professional triumph. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where standing up for yourself felt risky but necessary? How did you find the courage to fight back when everything seemed stacked against you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story inspired you to think differently about workplace challenges or personal resilience, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need encouragement. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in difficult circumstances. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it reminds you that you have more power than you think when you're willing to stand up for what's right. Remember, your attention to detail and professional integrity are assets that no one can take away from you, and sometimes the very qualities that seem to create problems can become the keys to your greatest success.